jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one.
Welcome to another edition of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
I'm Craig.
We're bringing you this week's edition here just a few days before the holidays. And our present to you is a tale from Finland called Rare Exports, a Christmas tale. Craig, I think you were the one who was most interested in seeing this movie. Where did you first hear about it?
Yeah, I read about it somewhere on Bloody Disgusting or something around the time that it came out. And I always thought that it looked interesting, and I had just never gotten around to watching it. And we had to pick stuff for this, and I was kind of just looking through Christmas-themed horror stuff, and this one popped up. I read a few reviews, and it got really, really positive reviews, so I thought, let's save this so we have something good to go out on this year.
Yeah, it's pretty appropriate. A movie about Santa Claus. Of course, we did a movie about the anti-Santa Claus last week, and this movie really has a lot of parallels in many ways to the Krampus story, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, especially in the beginning, the way that the movie starts out is we see this kind of corporate drilling site, I guess, on the top of a mountain, and they have drilled down and they found ice down there, and the guy who's in charge is all excited.
See, at first I thought we drilled into some old tree or something. But no. This level of sawdust is 65 foot thick. I mean, it doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense.
It does. In the olden days, people used to store ice by encasing it in sawdust.
Yeah, but what do you mean? What are you trying to say?
This mountain is like a giant ice box.
For storing what?
Drill deeper, and you will see.
Well, I am. They're drilling as we speak.
And these two little kids who, one of them, Pietari, who ends up being our main character, they're kind of spying and seeing what's going on, and he immediately comes to the conclusion that what they must have found is Santa Claus buried. Now, where he came to that conclusion from, I don't really know. But he goes home and he finds this old book that he looks through that kind of, it's the truth about Santa Claus. And it's much like the Krampus tale. He opens it and he's looking through the pictures, and you see these kind of scary images of Santa Claus. He's horned. He's not the jolly old fat guy that we have come to know and love. There's pictures of him stealing children, boiling children in cauldrons. And so in that regard, yes, very, very, very similar. Even similar in look, really.
It really is, because the Santa Clauses in here have horns. Of course, they're wearing a little more of the traditional Santa outfits in some pictures, but some that seem to maybe go back for years into the older lore just have them looking kind of like a Krampus devil.
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like what
definitely.
we're talking about. And this is up in Finland, pretty much at the border, it looks like, between Finland and Russia. And the people in the mountain who are doing the excavating are on the Russian side. And the boys had to cut through. It was actually Pietari and his friend Juzo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or Yuso,
yeah,
who
right.
had to cut through the fence to get through and in there. So this is an interesting part of the world that I'm not very familiar with. This lifestyle of these Finnish people way out in the cold, out in the middle of nowhere. It's almost like when you think of Siberia, this is where they are. And their profession is to basically harvest reindeer.
Right.
Which is just kind of cute. It's another Christmassy thing, way that this all sort of ties together, right? I guess if Santa Claus is going to be frozen in a mountain somewhere, he's going to be frozen in a mountain somewhere where there's tons of reindeer.
Right.
And so this family, Pietari, just has his father, and all we really see are men in this it just hit me. Yeah,
it is. I don't remember if there were any women at all. And it doesn't say what happened to the mother. You get the sense that there's been some tragedy. She's died, I presume. But you're right. All of the characters are male. I don't think there's a single woman in the film, at least
There's not even a girl.
Yeah, not recognizable. There comes a point where Pietri has a list of his friends because he's calling to see if his friends are okay, and we'll get to why in a second. And that one of the names on the list was Elsa. So I guess
that's true.
I guess there are girls or women somewhere. And one of the other main male characters talks about his wife. So I guess there are women around, but they are not in the film, at least not recognizably so. I mean, I guess some of those extras towards the end could have potentially been women. I don't know.
Well, it's a very masculine type movie. You know, it's a very male-centered movie. You've got these people out there in this rugged, harsh environment, and the men are clearly the ones who are bringing the bread home, because they're the ones who are herding in these reindeer and hunting them. It turns out that Pietri's father, Rauno, is the butcher, basically, of the clan, if you will. The village, I guess, is what it is.
Yeah, it is a really interesting setting because it's so remote and it's so limited. I mean, Pietri and his dad, I guess they're kind of as a little village, but they kind of live, I guess, a little bit out on the outskirts of that. And it's just really secluded and it's really rustic. It's a very different scenario. It's not something that I've ever seen a movie really set against a backdrop like that, unless you want it like The Thing or
The Thing. Yeah, I kept thinking of The Thing. Actually, just watching this, and it's starting to get cold now too. It's like watching The Thing. There's never a scene where there isn't snow blowing around and people wearing fur coats and breathing into the cold. It must have been a pain to shoot this thing. But yet, then again, I guess Pietri can run outside without any pants on. He's so used to this.
Which I thought was hilarious, but then I'm thinking, this is the environment that they're used to. I certainly wouldn't want to be running around in my drawers out in the blizzard, but I guess that's the life they lead.
It's funny. And so this particular time of year, apparently, when the reindeer all, I guess, migrate or move in their herd towards the camp, and what did they call it? The Roundup?
Yeah.
So they have a very large pen created there, and they've gathered, again, it's like all the men and all the young boys out to this pen where the fence is electrified, and they're basically waiting for the reindeer to come across so that they can herd them into this pen and shoot them. And this is going to be, probably this one roundup is going to be their sustenance for the rest of the year.
That's certainly what they make it seem like.
Yeah, their export of this meat is their yearly salary, I guess.
Right. And from what I understand, I mean, reindeer meat is a very viable food source. So I mean, it's realistic in that regard. They have this huge pen set up and it's electrified, and they're waiting for the reindeer to show up. And it appears that they're going to show up on cue, but instead of a large herd showing up, it's just a couple of stragglers. And so they go try to look for the rest of the herd, which they find right at the entrance to the border, but they've all been slaughtered. And at first they think that maybe it was wolves because the Russians up on the mountain have been doing a lot of blasting, and they think that maybe that's driven the wolves down.
And in particular, that hole in the fence that Pietri and Yuso had cut earlier, they surmise, these are Russian wolves. These are the wolves that came through the fence. And so they don't know that the kids cut that hole. They assume that it's the fault of those guys on the mountain. And so they cross into the border, which is a pretty big deal. Apparently for them to do. But they cross over there anyway to find these guys and give them a what and demand about $85,000, which was their rough calculation of how much money they lost.
Right.
And I guess you don't need that much money to kind of live out there in the tundra where they are. $85,000 probably goes a really long way.
I would imagine.
And then, of course, when they get there, the guys are gone. There's this giant hole in the crater, and they realize, they've not been doing seismic testing. They've been doing some kind of excavating of something here. And as you said, it seems like Pietri, for whatever reason, decides that they're excavating Santa Claus, which turns out to be accurate.
Right. And meanwhile, Pietri has been sitting up at night, watching outside of his window because he believes that Santa Claus is now on the loose, and he has now this image of Santa Claus as a punisher. And one morning, close to Christmas, maybe even Christmas Eve, he wakes up and he realizes that he'd fallen asleep on his watch, and he looks out. He goes outside and looks, and the Christmas lights around his room have been unplugged, and there are footprints outside his window. So he's convinced that Santa Claus is spying on him and the other children. And he's not really far off.
No, and he even sees some bloody footprints under one of the reindeer that has that kind of claw-like look. And earlier in one of the books, we had seen a picture that said Santa's footsteps in the snow.
Right, walking barefoot in the snow.
They looked a little claw-like, just like that. The movie did a pretty good job of setting the scene so that you got the significance of each of these events.
Yes.
With that, what's essentially, I think, the credit scene, isn't it? When he's flipping through that book, more or less, and looking at things. It goes very slowly.
Yeah, I think so. It's right there in the beginning. So you know from the beginning what you're getting into. But the movie does a good job of kind of playing it clever, too. You kind of think you know what's going on. And then towards the end, there's an interesting twist. But
that's right. Before we get there, Pietri has that interesting shtick, a little bit of business with his advent calendar.
Yeah.
Where he, as it gets closer to Christmas, he's taped the 24 closed, and then he goes and he staples it closed.
Right.
You get the sense he really does not want it to happen.
Right.
Is that what you were thinking?
Well, he doesn't want Santa Claus to come.
It's a dread.
I guess, and in the mind of a child that would seem rational. We just won't open that door. We won't open the 24 door because we don't want Santa to come.
Do you think he was always that way, or that it was just his stumbling across this book that Santa was bad about the time that he's sort of surmised that these guys on the mountain are excavating Santa?
Yeah, that's the suggestion that I got, was that he has now realized the truth about Santa, and that the truth is kind of dark and scary, and so that he's very much on the watch now.
So anyway, what happens later is that his father has set up this wolf trap earlier outside of the window, which apparently is illegal to do, but it's a big hole in the ground with a bunch of spikes in it, and suspended a boar's head over it with an apple in its mouth.
Right. One
of those really cute moments. There's a lot of interesting humor. I think it probably... Maybe there was more humor in this movie than we got because of the translation.
I have a feeling that's the case. The subtitles were fine, and you could definitely keep up with what was going on. But there would be, and of course I don't know anything about the intricacies of the Finnish language, I don't know, but I noticed that there were some times when the dad, or any other character, would say something, and the subtitle would be very brief. It seemed like they were saying more than what we were actually given. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's the case or not, but there still was some cute little humor, particularly towards the end. But I read on a comment board somewhere, somebody had posted that they had watched this with their Finnish girlfriend, and the Finnish girlfriend really kind of delighted in a lot of the Finnish humor. So maybe we missed out on a little bit of it, but there's some there.
I think we probably did. I think there's probably a lot that just got lost in translation just because of and not even just the words, just maybe a quirkier sense of humor, a different sense of humor than what we're used to.
Sure.
But it was kind of funny. He's eating the apple, then he sticks the rest of it in this hogshead.
Right, for the bait.
Suspended over for the bait. And lo and behold, they catch something. But it's not a wolf.
Right. And, the young boy, Pietri, is very curious because he's convinced that it is probably Santa Claus, but the dad tries to keep him away. He doesn't want him to see what's in there. But soon the dad's friend arrives, and they go out and pull out something in a tarp. They take it into the dad's butcher shop and lay it out on the table, and they at first think that it must be one of the people from the dig site, or maybe one of them says one of those crazy folks from the mountains. I don't know if they've just got like crazy, mountain hobos, I guess. I don't know, but
from the USA, no less.
Right.
There was an American passport that didn't look anything like the guy.
Right. But, for all intents and purposes, it appears that they've captured Santa Claus. Mm-hmm. I mean, aside from the fact that he's a scrawny old man, he looks like the traditional Santa Claus. He's got the long white beard, kind of the haggard face, and that's what I'm thinking is they got him, and here he is. But what I thought was interesting was that as scary as he had been played up to be, this guy didn't seem all that threatening. They didn't have, they thought he was dead at first, and their solution because putting out the wolf traps is illegal, they've got all that butcher stuff handy.
It's kind of a sinister and funny moment at the same time.
So they're just, their plan apparently is just to dispose of this and pretend like nothing has happened. But when the dad goes to saw Santa Claus's arm off, he jerks his arm away.
Night, sir.
And they check his breathing. They put a knife up under his nose, and he is in fact breathing, and he's awake.
And he's smelling the children. Every time Pietri comes up to the window, he kind of gets a sniff, and his eyes open up a little bit. And there's a lot of that interesting that he smells the almost like the child catcher from
Chitty Bang Bang. Yeah. And sinister, but again, not particularly threatening. I mean, they've got him contained, and he kind of gives them. They try to speak to him in Russian. They try to speak to him in English. Eventually, he doesn't appear to understand anybody, and he gives some threatening side looks and whatnot. But they're able to keep him contained, and eventually they tie him up. But before they do that, Pietri is looking in the window. His dad turns around and sees him, and he's in trouble. So Pietri goes running off down the street, and his dad goes after him in the car. But before his dad gets to him, a police car pulls up, and Pietri gets into the car, and so the dad follows the police car into the town, where the dad says to the cop, "Oh, everything's fine. There's nothing to worry about." And the cop says something like, "Well, if that's the case, you're the only ones, because I've been out in the village all night long." And apparently there's been a crime spree of sorts in the village.
Everything that can produce heat, basically, radiators, stoves, hair dryers, have all been taken and been missing. And they kind of write that off, except that Yuso's dad finds, I guess he's a potato farmer, or at least that's part of his deal, finds that his whole storehouse of potatoes that was kept in sacks, nobody's taken the potatoes, but they've dumped them all out of the sacks, and all the sacks are gone. So you're getting this sort of funny, as your mind puts it together a little bit, okay, we know that somebody's going to warm something up, and we know that these sacks are gone, and you think of sacks and Santa, and you're still not quite sure what's going on, but it is a little funny in and of itself.
Yeah, it is. and so they're there talking to the cop, and Pietri asks one of the dad's friends, where is your son? This other little boy that Pietri is friends with. And he says, "Oh, he must not be up yet." So Pietri goes upstairs, and in the bed where the boy should be, there's this creepy kind of facsimile of a child. Like, I want to say doll, but it's creepier than that. It seems kind of more natural, like it's made out of earth and twigs or something. I mean, it's a little bit creepy. And, The kid's dad is not particularly concerned. He says, "Oh, he'll show up, by nightfall or whatever." But that shows to Pietri that he is right, that the kids have been snatched up by Santa Claus.
Yeah, and he goes home, and to confirm this, he gets on the phone and he makes a list of his friends. It's so cute.
It is cute. And I have to say, this little boy is really cute, and he really carries a lot of the movie. I mean, he's the central character. The grown men certainly play an integral role, and their performance is perfectly fine too. But this little kid is just really precocious, and you're kind of on the, you kind of suspend that disbelief, and you are kind of in the mindset of the kid too.
Yeah.
And it's nice in that way. It's a sweet, kind of nostalgic, kind of Christmassy feel.
He's one of these sort of quiet kids that's quietly taking in what's going on, and always seems to be able to say the right things at the right times, just because he's almost got it all figured out in his head, or at least you think he does. It's so neat how early on he, in preparation for the Christmas day, has armored himself with all of the armor type things he can find. So he's wearing like a life vest or something, and he has his helmet on like he's going to play hockey.
Right.
And he's even duct taped some cardboard to his butt. I mean, and he's just sort of walking around like this goofball. And his dad even asks him, he's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, "Oh, it's just a game that my friend and I play upstairs."
Yeah, it is cute. And he's packing heat too. His dad has given him a small rifle, I presume to protect himself from wolves, should any wolves appear. But it's a cute little image of this little boy. What would you say, like 9?
Maybe 9, if that. Yeah.
And he's all decked out in what he imagines would protect him in his time of need, and he's got this rifle strapped to his back. It's a funny, cute image.
It is cute. Once he confirms that the kids are gone, he tries to get the adults' attention, and they're sort of distracted by this idea. And they sort of come to this notion that this is Santa Claus. He's the one who suggests it, pretty much.
Right.
And says, "Oh, they were digging, that's who they were excavating up here." So these guys, the kid basically comes in and suggests that it's Santa Claus, and they are oh so willing to go along with that.
Well, initially they say, no, it's just fairy tale stuff. But this guy, Santa, that they have captured, when they captured him, he was wearing a coat, and it was one of the workman's coat from the site, and so they just discarded it first, which is another funny thing. You've got Santa Claus running around naked for a good while.
That's right.
Interesting image, this, kind of frail old guy, totally nude.
And they're just poking him, and he's kind of
sticks,
curled in the corner and stuff.
Where are your friends?
Kysy siltä, mitä ne kaivoi sieltä tunturista.
What did you dig inside the mountain?
But eventually, from this coat, they hear something, a noise, and they find a walkie-talkie in there, and on the other end of the walkie-talkie is the American who seems to be the boss, the guy who's funded this project or whatever, and he's saying, is Santa's sleigh ready, or something along those lines? Is the cargo ready? And so they figure, well, it must be. And the plan that they hatch is, these people were responsible for us losing our income for the year, so we'll sell Santa back to them to cover our losses. And that's what they plan to do.
And, this is the point when I'm expecting, okay, he's going to escape, there's going to be, he's going to grow fangs, he's going to bite these people or whatever. Nope. The next shot is this totally cornball shot of him in a giant cage in the back of this truck. They've dressed him in a Santa suit and everything, and they're driving him out to meet a helicopter at the storage location of this company in order to make an exchange for $85,000.
Right. And one of the guys wants to demand much more money. He says, if this is the real original Santa Claus, somebody's going to be getting rich off this. But Pietri's dad is just satisfied to get, to recover their losses. So they meet this American guy there who, he was in the opening scene, and he was the one that was so excited at what they had found, and he had said something back then, always believe, always. He kind of said that to himself, and then he's talking to the men. He says, my wildest dream since childhood is about to come true. We're standing on a sacred grave. So apparently this has kind of been his life mission, to find Santa Claus, and now he has. And so he meets them there, and he wants to know who they are, but, they're like, it doesn't matter, we've got what you want, just give us the money. And it seems like he's pretty agreeable to it. Like, he doesn't really object. Who knows? He may have had to pay more to the other guys. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. This is the part where I thought, okay, now Santa's going to show his true colors. He's going to bust out of this thing. He's going to be crazy powerful and scary. But the guy goes right up to the cage and looks at him, and Santa kind of gets this flash in his eye.
Shh. Put down your weapons and smile. As nice as you can. And move slowly. And do exactly as I say.
Mitä se sanoo? Pitää olla hiljaa.
This is not Santa.
What?
It's one of Santa's little helpers.
And that is when, for me, up to that point, I enjoyed the movie overall, but I felt like up to that point, the build had been pretty slow.
Yes.
And it was, interesting, but I felt like it was a little bit drawn out. I was wishing that we would get to more action a little bit quicker. And then here, when this twist came, I thought, well, that's it. This is at least really interesting. I didn't expect it. I didn't see it coming at all.
No.
And what happens is, they kind of look around. All of a sudden, they see these figures darting around in the shadows in the dark. The guy who was flying the helicopter that delivered the American guy, he gets dispatched kind of off screen. You just kind of see his hat come flying into screen, and you hear him screaming. And then it becomes clear that all of these shadowy guys around are just like the guy that they've captured. They're these scrawny, decrepit old men, and apparently these are the elves.
Which begs the question, if these are Santa's little elves, how big is Santa, right?
Exactly.
And this is the point where it gets totally sort of screwball, in that it would be a screwball comedy if it wasn't still such a more subdued Finnish kind of
Right.
film, maybe this is as close as we get to screwball comedy in that film world. But the kid walks up to even a large it looks like a giant hanger.
Yeah.
And the hanger doors on it, on the hanger door is painted 24.
Right, and it's virtually identical to the 24 on his advent calendar that he's had stapled up.
It's a hilarious little touch.
It is hilarious, and it was really kind of a cool set piece. Then you've got this little tiny kid standing in front of these huge doors, and he just says, "The last door." And they go in there, and they see that all of the stolen appliances, the heaters, the stoves, all of that has been set up in a circle, and the little boy says, "The elves made a nest for Santa Claus." And it pans up, and you see that within the circle of all these appliances are sacks, moving sacks. So obviously the children have been gathered around, and it's this huge, enormous block of ice with two enormous horns protruding from the top. And apparently this is Santa Claus. And the elves, what they were doing was they're thawing him out so he can do his thing.
And they've gathered all the children from around in front of them. And this is funny because this is the point where the adults, they're all barricaded themselves into this building because the elves have approached them from all direction or outside. They know they're pretty screwed. There's no way they're going to get out with those elves surrounding them. And they all have like pickaxes and things like that. I mean, it's kind of, even though these are old men, they clearly can hold their own.
Sure. And there's a lot of them.
Oh,
it
yeah.
seems like, it's like a horde of
And so do you think they were frozen with Santa, or do you think they were just sort of activated?
Idea.
That part never really gets explained.
I guess it's kind of a plot hole. I have no idea if they were also excavated or if they just didn't have anything to do because Santa Claus was trapped.
That could
I don't know.
That could be. Then they just sprung into action when needed. Well, at any rate, the kid's the one who comes up with the whole plan. He just sort of jumps into high gear and he's like, "Trust me, listen to me. Those elves aren't going to leave the hangar while the kids are still here, so we need to get the kids out."
And it's hilarious. The guys are all kind of panicking, and they're trying to stack up the ovens and stuff to barricade and keep the elves out. And the kid's shouting, "Listen to me," and they won't. So he takes his shotgun and fires it into the air and gets their attention, and then he just totally takes charge.
Well, that part itself is hilarious because he fires a shotgun and they all turn and look at him, and it's just sort of this slow motion zoom in on him where he kind of turns, he looks, and and of course it's not smoke coming out of his mouth, but it's condensation from his breath or whatever, but he's just got that badass sort of die-hard look to him, when he's...
And it is hilarious because at that point, he just takes charge, and the men listen to him, they're going to follow his plan, and he's got as not plausible as this whole thing really is. It's funny, and it's fun to watch.
It is. So, I mean, to make a long story short, the guy breaks out. One of the guys gets out and gets past the elves by dropping gingerbread along the way. Which
there's been a running gingerbread gag throughout.
They've got funny gingerbread coming out of their pockets, apparently. And then he gets into a helicopter, pulls the kids out in the giant sacks with a giant sack.
Right, in a giant net.
Mm-hmm, which then Pietre is actually riding as it swings through the air and, of course, draws the elves away and eventually into that pen.
Right, the reindeer pen.
Which was a great idea.
Right. And meanwhile, the other adults are back at the warehouse or hangar or whatever it is. Coincidentally, there happened to be a large stockpile of explosives in there also. So they are setting up explosives all around the big block of ice and drilling explosives into the ice. And once they've got that all set up, they saw off the Santa Claus's horns, which are enormous. I mean, they're so big. Like they're like as big as the truck. They put them in the back of a bed of a truck, and they're just these huge, enormous horns. And what happens is, while Pietri is gathering, of course, he has to. When they get there, it's his idea to go to the pen, but when they get there, he realizes that the gate is closed, and so he calls on his walkie-talkie the guy who's flying the plane and says the gate's closed, and the guy says, well, it was a good plan, it's too bad it's not going to work out, and the kid says, no, I'm going down there, I'm going to open it, and the guy says, but you can't, I won't be able to land to pick you up, and he just, in a very, Bruce Willis Die Hard moment, he's just, I'm not coming back. And he drops down into the pen, very heroically, and he opens the gate, and this huge horde of zombie-like Santa Clauses are approaching, and he just gets on the walkie one more time and says, "Tell my dad what I did."
So good.
It's silly, but at the same time, it's cute. You know?
It's cute coming from this kid, you know?
Yeah,
this
I mean,
little boy.
The whole time he's been preoccupied with, you know, he's asked his dad blatantly, "Am I a good boy? You know, am I a good boy or am I a bad boy? You know, would it be better if I just disappeared and went away?" It seems like he's really wanted to prove himself to his dad, and as corny as it is, he gets his chance, and it's a sweet little moment there at the end.
It really is. And then they blow up Santa and just sort of like killing the boss or killing Dracula or something
Right.
like that. Once Santa's completely exploded, the elves stop doing what they're doing.
Right,
They
it's
have
kind of like
no
the spell
reason,
is broken, right?
yeah, for existence. So they just kind of stumble around, and they're just standing there in the pen. And these guys do a quick calculation, like, so how much for one? 83,000. So how much for all these? And it was like 16 point something million.
Right?
And the next scene, I'm sorry, I was totally not expecting it.
No, I didn't see it coming at all either, and it's hilarious, and it tied back into the title so well. I thought that the ending was really clever. Kind of dark and weird.
But it might as well be, you
Right.
know, with how this movie's gone. Yeah, they just, they train these guys to be Santa Clauses and ship them all around the world.
They train them like on an assembly line. It's really hilarious. They give them dolls and like a wrapped box, and Pietri's dad sits in a chair in front of them with Pietri on his lap and like models the behavior, and you know they're trying to learn, and sometimes they mess up and have to be corrected, but if they do a good job they get their Santa hat. And then it cuts to the end where they are just boxing up these Santa Clauses in these big wooden crates.
Like literally.
Right. That are stamped with the words "rare exports, live contents."
From the original Land of Santa or something. I mean,
Right.
what a great marketing deal.
And they apparently have the guy who flew the helicopter before is clearly, you know, an excellent pilot, because now he's piloting this big cargo plane, and it's their happy ending. You know, not only did they recover their losses, but they're making tons of money now. Instead of exporting reindeer meat, exporting, I guess, mall Santas.
As far as Tanzania and
Yeah.
beyond, that's really funny. It was very much a Monsters Incorporated kind of ending, where now instead of scaring the children, they're going out and giving joy to
Right,
children.
right.
You know, It was an interesting ending. I guess, you know, I was looking up a little bit about this movie, and the movie was spurred on by a short.
Yeah.
That apparently was popular on the web. I didn't see it.
I haven't seen it either.
2003.
Yeah, I guess there was an original short, and then it was pretty successful, and then they made kind of a sequel short, and then somebody proposed the idea of doing a feature film, and they ran with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can kind of tell that, I guess something this goofy would come from origins like that, you know, something a little shorter, probably something that set a tone.
Right.
And this movie just then took that tone and expanded it across a whole film.
Right, and the runtime at 80-some minutes, I mean, it's a short movie, but it almost, and I don't want to be critical, because I did like it, but it almost felt like it would have maybe been more suited for an hour. The beginning especially just seemed to kind of be a little bit drawn out. Not that things weren't happening, not that we weren't getting more information. It was just kind of slow. I was kind of waiting for the action to pick up. But overall, I think that I had really high expectations, because this got really, really good reviews. I mean, around the world, it got really good reviews. Roger Ebert gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars, I think. It won lots of awards internationally. So I think that we've been putting this off to save it for the last one. My hopes were really high, and I think I was a little bit disappointed, but only because I had such great expectations. It's not a bad movie.
No, and it's not really a horror movie either. I mean, it is, but it's
really tame.
It's very tame, and it has that sort of adventure element to it as well. And I think the slow build also is not something that you normally get. You didn't have a scare at the beginning.
Right.
You didn't have it set up immediately that people were dying or there was this horrible thing out there going on. It took a while. And I think I would have had less patience for that slow build if the environment and the characters and their situation wasn't so interesting.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
And some of that's because it was foreign, but other parts of it, I really felt for this group of people whose livelihood for the year over the course of a couple hours is completely out the window.
Right.
And they do a really good job, I think, of setting up that relationship between Pietri and his dad, Rauno, when they're at that point. He burns the meat, for Christmas dinner, and all he really has is gingerbread that he's made, and they have a little bit about it was his mom's. But Rauno is very distracted. He's looking out the window. There are tears in his eyes, and Pietri is trying to kind of get through to him and trying to say some things, and he's basically telling him, just go to bed, and in a very loving way.
Right. But it's, I guess you have to attribute it to the performance and the direction, because it did, you did feel for the people, and you sensed the gravity of this situation for them. The dad is trying to keep his cool, but that's their yearly income. What are they going to do? It's a very serious situation they're in. And I agree that the characters were very engaging. There are so many good things about it. I don't want to be... Again, I don't want to be critical because there are so many good things about it. I loved the score. I thought the score was beautiful. There were sometimes, you're in this setting with these beautiful, picturesque mountains and some really cool shots, some aerial shots, and you've got kind of this sweeping score against that setting that I thought was really effective. The cinematography seemed really good. This did not feel like a cheapy movie at all.
Not at all.
It felt, like something that people had really put time and effort and probably quite a bit of money into. So there are a lot of strong points. I think maybe had my expectations, and maybe had I gone in with no expectations, if I had known nothing about it, maybe I would have felt a little bit differently.
Well, and two, I think the ending does fizzle out just a little bit.
I was bummed. I was bummed that we didn't get to see the Santa Claus monster.
You never get to see the monster. It's in the ice, and I'm sure that was a deliberate choice on their part. But in the same sense, you didn't have that level of the final battle against the really supernatural big bad guy that you often get, in horror movies, but just in general. It's usually a lot tougher for people in the end. Usually plans kind of go awry. Pretty much this kid's plans worked out.
Right.
He knew what to do. They executed it. They had no trouble executing it, and it worked out.
Right. And that's all well and good. I don't need for it to be contrived. I'm fine with that. It's just, I think that the reveal of the Santa monster was such a cool reveal. It was so massive. But all you get to see is the horns. And the horns are very impressive and scary. But then I was thinking, I can't wait to see what's under that ice. I can't wait to when it cracks out. And there's one moment where the ice does kind of crack and you think, here it comes. But it just doesn't. And that's okay. I get it. I understand it as a choice. But a little bit of a letdown.
But it's a neutered bad guy, It's a bad guy that we've been building up to all this time who is just stuck in ice until he's blown up. And then it turns out that the bad guys that they really have to deal with are just these elf helpers. Which, as you said before, aside from the fact that there's so many of them, you get one by itself without a weapon in its hand, and a couple people around, it doesn't seem to be that much of a threat. No. So it's not a super threatening situation that they were in, which kind of brings it a little bit more out of the realm of horror. Maybe I wouldn't say it's a family film, but it's pretty darn close.
Yeah.
Maybe in the same sense that Krampus was. Maybe in the same sense that even more so than like Gremlins or something.
Right. I would say that it's even less dark than those films.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked before, could you let your kids see this? I think probably a lot of American children would be put off by the fact that it's subtitled. But beyond that, I think that you could show small children this movie. There are, and I say small children, like the age of the kid in the movie, 8, 9, 10. There are casualties, but they're all anonymous characters that you don't care about, and there's nothing really graphic or violent.
They're pretty much all, and that always happens off screen.
Right, and the only gore of any kind is, when the original elf falls into the wolf trap, he's kind of gored by one of the stakes in there, and you see the blood on his skin, but it's not terribly graphic. There is a fair amount of full frontal nudity with the old Santa Clauses. But beyond that, it does feel pretty family friendly. I would imagine that people could let their kids see this.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to have to look up this legend sometime, and see. We've seen several films now that present different takes on the Santa Claus legend and make certain claims about offshoots of that legend, ancillary characters like the Krampus. Well, this is the true story of Santa and how he came to be. Then now I'm kind of all confused.
Yeah.
Now I really want to get back and see, okay, is there more than the Saint Nick that we kind of know? And then, of course, the Coca-Cola Santa.
Right. And that's, I would like to as well. I feel like I've read some things. I've read some of the Krampus lore, and I know that the idea of Santa Claus is relatively universal, but each culture kind of puts their own spin on it. And it really comes as no surprise to me that the origins were almost certainly darker, or at least had a darker edge to them. In our culture, we kind of, it's just like with, the original Grimm fairy tales. We have kind of Disney-fied Santa to a certain degree, which is fine. It's sweet. It's a fun thing for kids. It doesn't necessarily have to have that dark edge, but it's still interesting, and you're right. I would be interested to learn more about it too.
Well, and a film that we're not going to get to, but if you are interested in seeing another dark Santa Claus movie before Christmas comes, Saint Nick, which I don't think you said you hadn't seen that. That's a pretty interesting take, and in that you get another European cultural view where not only is there Santa Claus or the Saint Nick kind of Santa Claus, but there's also a character that is his helper who's black, who's like a North African or something helper.
Yeah, I've read about that.
And they dress up. I mean, that is a whole cultural interpretation of Christmas that's been going on for hundreds of years that we are totally oblivious to.
Right.
That's not really that far off.
Right.
So there's a lot of Santa Claus lore to explore out there. There's a lot to play with. I wouldn't be surprised, especially after this Christmas, to start seeing a little more of the horror film Santa, or at least horror Christmas films coming next year.
Yeah, either that or people will be totally burned out on it. I feel like we've been really inundated with it this year, and I don't know why that is.
It's like it's come to a head, you know? I mean, this is a 2010 movie.
Right.
So...
And there have been some others. There's the really goofball Santa's Sleigh that came out, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. I think Santa was played by a professional wrestler. And, he was going around slaughtering people and stuff. So it's not like it's a new concept, but it really feels like we've been inundated with it recently.
We're getting higher quality movies, let's put it that way.
That's true.
But far beyond the direct-to-DVD fare, Santa's Sleigh and Jack Frost and those kinds of...
Well, and that was one of the other things that I kept thinking as we were watching this movie. One of the things that I really appreciated about it was that it didn't seem like a cookie-cutter copycat of some of those other movies we've gotten. It is unique. It's different. Yeah, it takes the spin on the bad Santa kind of thing, which we've seen before and we'll continue to see, I'm sure. But beyond that, it doesn't make me this is just like this movie, or it's just like that movie. No, I mean, it stands alone.
It's completely different.
Right.
Super different. And I even thought when I saw the horns, I was getting shades of Krampus, but only in the visuals.
Right.
Absolutely not in the plot, absolutely not in the lore or anything like that.
Yeah, I liked it. Overall, I liked it. I didn't think it was amazing, but it was enjoyable. And, if you like scary movies, but you're feeling more kind of on the warm, fuzzy side of Christmas, as we get closer, you kind of want to embrace the cheer and the happiness of it. I think this would be, an appropriate film for just a laid back, relaxing, it's not a big think piece, it's not super violent or gory. Really, more than anything, I'd say it's kind of a sweet movie.
It is. It's kind of a child's adventure film. Mm-hmm. We focus around that child the whole time, and just like in these films, it's the kid who saves the adults from themselves and who can think like a child does, which is what you have to do to save yourself in the situation. He's the one with the advanced knowledge. He's the one that knows what's going on all along. And as a kid, as long as you're cool with reading subtitles, this is the kind of movie you would enjoy, I think.
I think so. I think it's a cute movie.
Well, Merry Christmas to everybody. Thank you for listening to us during this month of Christmas-themed horror films. We've sure enjoyed exploring just a little bit of that corner of the horror market.
It really has been fun.
It's kind of put me in the mood.
Yeah.
In a weird way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend. Check us out on Facebook. Share our pages there as well. You can also now find us on Stitcher and on iTunes. So please subscribe to us there and have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
That is from Todd
and Craig
with Two Guys and a Chainsaw.